Thank you, Prof. Fino. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pravar Jain, and on behalf of my co-authors, I will be sharing with you our work on Season Traveler. The human perceptual system has been conditioned by the perception of real-world multisensory stimuli, such as taste, touch, temperature, smell, among many others. So, isn't it crucial to appeal to these same perceptual mechanisms in order to create a more immersive virtual reality experience? The concept of multisensory VR is still in its infancy. However, some of the work done in this domain highlight the potential benefits of integrating additional sensory modalities towards improving immersion in VR. Sensorama is one of the earliest examples of such systems. More recent works include Ambiotherm, which we had presented at CHI last year. Taking cues from these works, we have developed Season Traveler, a wearable accessory that integrates olfactory, thermal, and wind stimuli within traditional audiovisual-based VR systems in order to improve the user's sense of presence in VR. So with Season Traveler, users experience 4 different seasons with olfactory, wind, and thermal cues associated with each of them in order to complement the audiovisual simulation. But why Season Traveler? Well, in Singapore, we pretty much have summer throughout the year. So you kind of start missing the different seasons. And when we got to recreating these seasons in VR, we realized that apart from the visual cues, it's the other associated factors, such as the weather conditions and the aromas, that play a vital role in us appreciating and experiencing these seasons. So we developed Season Traveler. To implement the thermal and wind stimuli, we chose Peltier elements and fans mounted on servo motors because they afford low latency delivery of the stimuli, and also they can be controlled and calibrated to ensure that the users are not at risk. Based on findings with Ambiotherm, we incorporated them in the form factor of a thermal neck collar and the wind simulation module focused at the user's face in order to create an ambient effect. Now, to configure olfactory stimuli with the Season Traveler experience, we did a bunch of preliminary studies. First was to understand the season-based olfactory association for the crowd in Singapore. We conducted the study in 2 parts, first comprising of an online survey, and second involving an actual smell test for the aroma association. And based on popular votes, we chose jasmine for spring, lemon for summer, and cinnamon for autumn. Interestingly, while most people voted for chocolate to be associated with winter in the online survey, voted for mint instead after the smell session. We believe that this could be because of the cool sensations that are generally associated with mint. Now, to deliver these aromas, based on literature, we came up with 4 different configurations of delivery mechanisms. These included the air pump, a microfan, piezo diffuser placed at a distance, which is PF, and piezo diffusers placed in close proximity to the user's nose, which is PN. We evaluated these 4 configurations at intensities of 30%, 50%, and 70% for factors such as the perceived intensity, naturalness, comfort, and relaxation. As you can observe, piezo near scored the highest perceived intensity in comparison to the other configurations. However, we noticed that there were notable reductions in terms of the factors such as comfort and naturalness. Hence, we chose the air pump at 70% intensity for the final implementation of the system. Now, in order to actuate over a prolonged period of time with the air pump, we decided to come up with 5 different patterns of actuation, and the objective of this was to choose a pattern that can help us avoid the adaptation of the human senses, the human sense of smell, due to overexposure of the stimuli, and also to ensure that the actuation and the perception is consistent throughout the experience. So the patterns that we chose varied in duty cycle from 100% to 25%. For the final implementation, we chose 100% duty cycle as the pattern for actuating because the perceived intensity of the stimuli was significantly higher than all other configurations, number one. And number two, we did not find any significant difference in terms of factors such as the comfort, relaxation, and naturalness scores. For the system implementation, we used a Samsung Gear VR, and the VR environment was built on Unity. With the Seasoned Traveler experience, users were led on a hot air balloon ride through a mystical land comprising of 4 different seasons. And with each of these seasons and the different events that occurred within the season, the VR app communicates with the control module via Bluetooth in order to actuate the thermal, wind, and the olfactory stimuli that are associated with that particular season. Also, as the users traverse through these different seasons, they would encounter golems that would try to shoot down the hot air balloon by throwing boulders at them, and the users could interact by tilting their heads in order to steer and direct the hot air balloon. For the evaluation of the entire system, we came up with 5 different configurations. These included the system with only audio-visual stimuli, that is traditional VR as we know it, VR plus olfactory stimuli, VR plus wind stimuli, VR plus thermal stimuli, and VR plus olfactory, wind, as well as thermal stimuli, which is Seasoned Traveler, ST. And the objective of this evaluation was to systematically compare and assess the impact of the different stimuli on the user's experience in VR. And for this, we used subjective measures such as Whitmer and Singer's presence questionnaire and the game experience questionnaire. We also used psychophysiological measures such as the heart rate and electrodermal activity in order to gain some insights into this. Right. Moving on to the results. Sense of presence is typically assessed on the basis of 4 factors. We found that Seasoned Traveler scored significantly higher than all other configurations in terms of the sensory factors. Diving deeper into the sensory subfactors, we found that Seasoned Traveler scored significantly higher in terms of the engagement, olfactory involvement, wind involvement, and thermal involvement. 85% of the participants perceived the olfactory stimuli to be part of the ambient environment. 100% of them perceived the wind stimuli to be part of the ambient environment, and 95% of them perceived the thermal stimuli to be part of the ambient environment. Now, even with the addition of multiple external sensory stimuli, we noticed no significant difference between the different configurations, especially with respect to traditional VR in terms of the sense of moving and the perceived stimuli delay. This goes on to highlight the degree of synchronization that went into integrating the different stimuli with Seasoned Traveler. In terms of the other factors, we found no difference, especially with respect to realism and control. However, and more importantly, we found no significant difference in terms of the distraction. This is crucial because it kind of validates the delivery and the configuration of the external stimuli that we had chosen. In terms of the richness of the experience, we found that Seasoned Traveler scored significantly higher than VR. Moving on to the physiological measures, we had measured heart rate and electrodermal activity throughout the entire study. And As most of you all might know, heart rate is often used to measure valence. And higher heart rates tend to be associated with tense states or arousal. We noticed that with VR plus wind and VR plus thermal, there was a rise in the heart rate on the onset of stimuli at times. We believe that this could be because of the unexpected raw impact or the raw nature of the stimuli themselves. With VR plus olfactory, we see a rise in the heart rate towards the end of the experience, and this could be attributed to the olfactory fatigue that sets in. Interestingly, with seasoned traveler, we see that these effects tend to diminish. That is, it tends to reduce the distraction induced by the individual modalities themselves. Next, the electrodermal activity, which is a biomarker characteristic of the emotional responsiveness of the user, was recorded throughout the entire study. And high EDA levels are generally said to correlate with negative affects. Negative affects include things like frustration. With VR plus wind, VR plus thermal, and VR plus olfactory, you see that there is an increase in the electrodermal activity. However, with seasoned traveler, the electrodermal activity is comparable to that of traditional VR. This again goes on to highlight the fact that a suitable combination of the different modalities can help reduce or negate to some extent the negative effects that are created by them individually. And by reducing these effects, we can expect the experience to be more immersive in nature. With that, I'd like to conclude my talk by summarizing a few points. These are key results. These include the fact that addition of any singular modality improves the sense of presence in VR is with reference to traditional VR only. And a suitable combination of these stimuli produces a further significant enhancement in the sense of presence. Furthermore, this combination of stimuli does not induce any distraction. In fact, it reduces it at times. Thus, we make the case that the integration of multisensory stimuli in traditional VR systems is not only effective, but also feasible. In the future, we'd like to look at multiple avenues. These include incorporating a personalized calibration routine in order to address the subjectiveness of the human senses. We also look to integrate additional sensory modalities and also, more importantly, use physiological measures to better understand the different factors that impact the user sense of presence in VR. With that, I'd like to invite everyone to come and experience Seasoned Traveler at Kai Expo later tonight. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take questions now.
Hi, Graham Wilson from the University of Glasgow. Did you take a measure of simulator sickness or nausea?
Right. We didn't specifically use the simulator sickness questionnaire, which is the SSQ, or anything that's directly linked to visually induced motion sickness. However, with Whitmer and Singer's presence questionnaire, there is one of the sensory sub-factors that looks at things such as the sense of moving. Now, sense of moving is often the reason which induces motion sickness or simulator sickness. And since we did not notice any significant difference with the Seasoned Traveler system in comparison to traditional VR, we believe that the addition of multiple sensory modalities does not induce any simulator sickness.
Okay. I would argue that you still need a validated measure of simulator sickness to claim that. But just wondering, because simulator sickness does cause physiological changes, so increases in heart rate and increases in skin conductance. So to be able to kind of separate them, it'd be good to have a measure of sickness and then compare that to the physiological measures in case there's some influence there.
That's a valid point, and we have done that. We'll probably have to wait for the next paper to come out.
Okay, thanks.
And so my question was about the experience. This is one in which each one of those experiences was a season, and it sounds to me, and maybe I'll experience it myself tonight, that the smell and the feel of heat and the wind was probably consistent throughout that experience. Is that right?
Yep.
For each one of those? And so one question would be, what about experiences in which the smells and especially the olfaction is supposed to change in a more rapid-fire way? Which I know, especially for olfactory systems, tends to be difficult because getting the scent to you is easy. Getting rid of it really easily without blowing things in your face is harder. So have you thought about that?
In the present iteration of the system, like you mentioned, it's quite static. But we're working towards how we can, to some extent, reduce effects of the aroma lying around in the immediate environment around you. And the only way that we can probably think of is to suck the entire air around you, but which is not entirely possible and feasible. So we believe that there will be some amount of contamination when there is a change, when there's a dynamic change in the olfaction, but hopefully it shouldn't last for too long. But there's definitely scope for optimization there.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to trying it tonight. Any more questions? So if we have no more questions, I'd like to thank the